Hi, boys and girls. This is Mrs. Roach back for our second video for this week. Before we get started, I just want to make sure that you are ready for learning. You have a quiet space, you have a pencil, and a notebook. All right, we are going to continue learning about objects in space for lesson 3. And so here are our objectives. I can support an argument to explain how the force of gravity affects the location of objects in space. I can acquire and use new vocabulary words in context. So, we're going to continue learning new vocabulary words that are about objects in space. And we're also going to talk about how gravity affects these objects, the location of them. All right. So, here are our vocabulary words, boys and girls. Last week, I introduced these words to you. And so, we're going to use these words when explaining about objects in space. And the three words are we have asteroid, which we talked about in the last video, meteor, and comet. Now, an asteroid, let's review, is one of many small rocky objects between Mars and Jupiter. And so we talked about how asteroids can be found in the asteroid belt, which is right in between Mars and Jupiter in space. Today, we're going to talk about meteors, okay? You heard this word last week during Mr. Abbott's lab when he talked about how when meteors, which are a chunk of rock from space that travels through Earth's atmosphere, when they hit another planet, so if they were to happen to hit Earth or the moon, they form what's called a crater, okay? And we learned that last week. Well, we're going to learn some more about meteors in this lesson. And the next object and vocabulary word is comet. And the definition for comet is a mixture of ice, frozen gases, rock, and dust left over from the formation of the solar system. So we're going to be talking about meteors and comets today. Okay? All right, so other objects in space. All right, so it says other than the sun, planets and moons are the largest objects in the solar system. The next largest objects are dwarf planets. And so, for example, Pluto is now considered a dwarf planet. Okay. And so, however, many smaller objects are also found in our solar system. So, here is the list of other objects we have asteroids, we have meteoroid, meteor, meteorite, and comets. Now, take a look at these three words, boys and girls. Do they look similar? Yes, they do. Meteoroid and meteorite both have the word meteor in it, okay? The root word meteor. And so these three words are related. And we're going to talk about the difference between each of those words and how they are different. And then we're going to talk about comets and learn about comets as well. All right. So we're going to watch this video that's called What's the Difference Between All of the Objects That You See Down Here that I just introduced to you. What is the difference between all the objects in space? All right, so please watch the video clip.
They're part of action and sci-fi movie plots. We wait out in our backyard to see them showering over Earth. But what's the difference between comets, asteroids, meteoroids, meteors, and meteorites? Let's start with comets. Comets are basically big balls of dust, rock, and metals, surrounded by a thick, icy shell orbiting our sun. And when comets get too close to something hot, like the sun, their ice sublimates, or goes instantly from a solid to a gas. This creates a halo-like glow around the comet, called the coma. And our sun's strong solar winds blow the coma back, giving the comet their infamous tail. Comets can be classified as either long period or short period, depending on whether or not their orbits are longer than 200 years. Comets have highly elliptical orbits, which means they're like a long circle. In fact, some comets can be taken almost completely out of the solar system before they return again. Next are asteroids. Basically, asteroids are just comets without the ice, just dust, rock, and metal. Most asteroids form in between Mars and Jupiter, in a region called the asteroid belt. While asteroids are rarely directed at Earth, they do pose grave danger to our planet. After all, 65 million years ago, a city-sized asteroid hit near Mexico and caused the dinosaurs to go extinct. Then we have meteoroids. Meteoroids are just pieces of rocky space debris floating around the solar system. Technically, meteoroids are larger than a grain of dust, but smaller than an asteroid. However, most meteoroids are usually only the size of a pebble. Most meteoroids also come from the asteroid belt, but some do come from our moon or even Mars. Next are meteors. Simply put, meteors are just meteoroids that actually hit Earth's atmosphere. We know these better as shooting stars. As a meteor hits our atmosphere, it burns up, causing a big flash of light in the sky. In fact, the term meteor from ancient Greece literally means celestial phenomenon in the heavens above, which refers directly to the flash of light itself. Even though they appear as big shooting stars, meteors are actually only the size of pebbles. Last but not least, meteorites. A meteorite is simply a meteoroid that successfully makes it through Earth's atmosphere and hits the Earth's surface. Meteorites are dangerous simply because they're too small to be detected. They come without a warning. And even though meteorites are usually very small, around the size of a pebble, they're still very dangerous because they travel at high velocities. Fortunately, it's very rare for a meteoroid to actually make it through Earth's thick atmosphere. Thanks, Earth! For more awesome videos about our universe, subscribe.
Okay. So let's talk about what we just learned on the video, okay? It says, what is the difference between a meteor, a meteoroid, and a meteorite? I want to show you this website, boys and girls. There are a lot of great sources of information on the internet that have to do with the solar system and objects in the solar system. And so this is a NASA, a website from NASA. And let's recap what they talked about on the video, okay? It says they're all related to the flashes of light called shooting stars, sometimes seen streaking across the sky. But we call the same object by different names depending on where it is. So, boys and girls, a meteoroid, meteorite, and meteor are the same object, but depending on where it is when the name changes, okay? So here we have meteoroids that are objects in space that range in size from dust grains to small asteroids. Think of them as space rocks. When meteoroids enter Earth's atmosphere at high speed and burn up, the fireballs or shooting stars are called meteors. And so that's, if you've ever seen a meteor shower, that's what you're seeing. Those are meteors. And so when they enter the atmosphere, which is very highly unlikely because of our thick atmosphere, they are then called meteoroids if they're able to enter the atmosphere. When a meteoroid survives the trip through the atmosphere and then actually hits ground, it's called a meteorite. All right, so look over here in this picture. It is a picture of scientists holding a meteorite from in Antarctica, okay? And so I wanted to show you this website with some really great information. And so let's look back and answer this question. What is the difference between a meteor, a meteoroid, and a meteorite? Well, a meteoroid is a small rocky or metallic object that orbits the sun. A meteor is the same as a meteoroid unless it comes close enough and enters Earth's atmosphere. When a meteoroid vaporizes, it becomes a meteor. Okay, if the meteor hits Earth's surface, it is called a meteorite. So depending on its location, gives it one of those three different names. All right. And then just a fun fact, many meteoroids are no bigger than grains of sand. Okay. All right. Here is a picture from our science handbook of a meteorite. Okay. And so a meteorite is when it hits a planet. Okay. It makes impact. So if you look at the bottom picture, here is the picture that was shared with you last week with the lab. About 50,000 years ago, a meteor hit Earth. So it was a meteorite. And it caused this crater when it collided with Earth's surface. So look down here. And this, you can't tell from the picture, but it is about 11 football fields wide. Okay, so it is a very large impact or crater. I'm sorry, 11 football fields long. Yep. So again, very rarely, this happened 50,000 years ago. And so it is extremely rare for them to impact Earth. All right, we're going to move on to learning about comets, okay? And if you can recall from the video, what is the difference between a comet and an asteroid? They are similar except for one factor. What is the difference between them? Good. A comet is surrounded in ice and an asteroid is not. It is not surrounded in ice. So a comet, we're going to read this paragraph together. A comet is a mixture of frozen gases, ice, dust, and rock that moves in an elliptical orbit around the sun. Comets are thought to be bits of material left over from the formation of the solar system about 4.6 billion years ago. Very long time ago. When a comet is farther away from the sun, the gases and ice in the comet are frozen. As the comet moves toward the sun, the core or nucleus of the comet warms up. Some of the ice and dust in the nucleus form a cloud or coma around the nucleus. Together, the coma and the nucleus make up the head of the comet. Okay? And so here's a diagram showing you the comet and its tail that you see in the sky as it orbits around the sun. And so what is a comet? Let's recap what we read. Good. A comet is a mixture of frozen gases, ice, dust, and rock that moves in an elliptical orbit around the sun. And so what happens to a comet as it gets closer to the sun? Let's read more to find out. As the comet gets closer to the sun, heat from the sun's rays pushes some of the coma away from the comet. This material forms a glowing tail that may stretch millions of kilometers behind the head. Sometimes two tails will form. One tail is made of ice and one is made of gases. Heat moves out from the sun in every direction. As a comet moves around the sun, the head stays closest to the sun and the tail trails out behind it. No matter where the comet is in its path around the sun, the comet's tail always points away from the sun. So here you have a picture from our science handbook. It says comets have tails of ice and gases. And so what happens as it gets closer? Well, comets orbit the sun like asteroids, but comets are made of dust, rock, metal, and covered in ice, where asteroids are just not covered in ice. And so as a comet's orbit takes it toward the sun, the ice and dust begin to vaporize. That vaporized ice and dust become the comet's tail. You can see a comet even when it is very far from Earth. However, when you see a meteor, it's in our atmosphere. All right, so here is a real picture an observer took of a comet in the sky at night. And you can see here how they're talking about sometimes it looks like there's two tails. Okay, and so that is a result of it coming closer to the sun. Okay, it is vaporizing and then giving off that kind of cloud of bright light. All right, so comets, we know, are covered in ice where asteroids are not. Okay, and meteors, we know, can enter our atmosphere, which is when we call them meteoroids. And then if they hit or have an impact with another planet, they become a meteorite. All right, so how are they similar? How are these two objects similar? All right, they are both space objects that can be visible in the night sky. So I showed you a picture of the comet and its tail. And then if you've ever seen meteors, sometimes look like falling stars or a meteor shower is when you'd see many meteors falling in the sky or appear to be falling in the sky. And so what are meteors? They are rocky or metallic objects. They're small usually, and they can enter Earth's atmosphere. Again, this is very unlikely because of our thick atmosphere, but they can enter. And a comet is frozen gas, dust, and ice, and they orbit the sun. Okay. All right. We just learned about the different objects in the sky. Now we're going to read and find out some more information about space objects. So boys and girls, I found some websites. There are so many great websites that you can do your own research on if you want to learn more about the solar system, planets, the moon. And so I'm going to answer a couple questions with you about the space objects. And I use some websites to find my answers to these questions. And I just want to show you some different websites that have great information that you can, we're going to answer a couple questions together using the website sources. And then there's a couple questions we're not going to answer, but I will show you the questions. And if, it's an optional enrichment activity, if you want to research on your own and find the responses to the questions. So here's one question to learn a little bit more about the space objects. And so when you do your own research, it's usually to just find more in-depth information about a topic, okay? This information isn't included in our science handbook, but there are, like I said, many websites that you can search the responses to. So in what areas do comets originate? Okay, well, I found this website and I just typed in my question in the search engine, and you do want to make sure it's a reliable website, okay? And once I found this website, boys and girls, I was able to find my answer. And so in this first paragraph, 2 paragraphs here, I found that comets originated from what's called the Oort cloud. And it was named after an astronomer who discovered it through his research. So here is the Oort cloud. So that's one place that comets originated from. And then there's a second place in the Kuiper Belt is another place where they believe comets came from. And so this is where I found my answer to my research question. And so here's my answer. Comets originate in the outer solar system beyond Neptune in the Kuiper Belt and the Oort cloud. So there you go. I used that website to help me find my answer. All right, here's another question. Name 4 of the largest asteroids. Well, after I did some research, I was able to find this website called solarstory.net. And after I've read through it, I scanned through it to find my answer. It gave me a list of the largest asteroids, and I read each caption. And this is how I was able to find 4 of the largest asteroids. Okay. So name 4 of the largest asteroids. Whoops, I did not want to do that. I'm sorry, boys and girls. Okay, here you go. So we have Ceres, Juno, Pallas, and Vesta are the 4 largest asteroids known to date. All right, and we have one more question. How do the movements of comets, meteors, asteroids compare to the movements of the planets? So here I found my answer through researching on NASA's solar system website. And again, these are questions that aren't necessarily found in our science handbook, so we have to do some independent research to find the answers on. And so once I looked on NASA's website, I found some great information after I read through each paragraph to come up with my answer. And this is what I found. It says everything in the solar system orbits the sun. Most asteroids orbit the sun just as planets do in nearly circular orbits. Other asteroids are more elliptical. Comets have extremely elliptical orbits. Meteor orbits cross Earth's orbit and enter the atmosphere. And so that just summarizes what I found on this website to be able to answer my question. All right, so there's a lot of great information out there, boys and girls. If you would like to extend this, again, it's optional. Here are just some questions that you could do research independently. You're more than welcome to share your findings with your teacher. Again, optional, but if you are interested, please do so. All right, we're going to return to our Paige Keeley probe, boys and girls. So in the beginning of the lesson, we picked a friend that we agreed with, and we tried to justify or explain why we agree with their thinking. And so let's take a look. Here's an opportunity for you to either adjust your thinking or be able to justify it a little bit better than in the beginning of the lesson based off of what you learn. So who do you agree with most? Who was right? Angie, Tamara, Carlos, or Mei-Ling? Carlos, okay? So Carlos, he said, I think Earth's gravity pulls on things close to the Earth, including some things in space. So not just some things close to Earth, but things in space also is what Carlos said. And so here's an explanation or justification that you could come up with as to why you agree or why you agree with Carlos. So let's read here and see his explanation. Objects on or near Earth, including objects in space, such as our moon, satellites, and meteors, are pulled toward Earth due to gravitational attraction of Earth, which is a large mass that attracts nearby objects of smaller mass. Okay, so that wraps up why Carlos, why his thinking is correct. And so sometimes objects in space, as they're orbiting, if they interfere or kind of nudge another planet's gravity, that is why they can sometimes fall out of orbit, which is very, very highly unlikely to occur. All right. And so our essential question, what other objects can be found in space? Here are all the objects that we learned about this past couple weeks. Planets, asteroids, meteors, comets, satellites, the moon, which is a natural satellite that orbits Earth, and spacecraft, okay? And so that wraps up all the objects in space. And that wraps up our lesson, boys and girls. And so here is our last joke of the week. How does NASA organize a space party? Well, they plan it. All right. That was a good one. All right, boys and girls, please make sure you do assignment 14, which is also called Objects in Space. And then next week, we will be moving on to the next topic. All right, bye-bye. Take care.